right. Welcome, Karen.
It's great to see you. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's
Of
good.
course. Thank you for joining us. We are live at our Overdose and Chill episode 108 with our special guest, Karen Baker, who is the founder and CEO of ShipperHQ. We are so excited to have you here. Just a note to everyone joining that we are broadcasting live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Feel free to leave a comment to anyone watching. We'll be answering throughout the broadcast and happy to share all those questions that come through throughout our conversation. But so happy to have you, Karen. Thanks for joining us.
No, it's great. I've heard a lot about this and been trying to get on for a while. So it's you guys are doing great things with this. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Good to see Overdose doing well as well. You guys are going from strength to strength. So
yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot of international, British accents in our within our company, and they always sound smarter. So even speaking to you, anything that you say will
I don't have to
sound smarter because of your accent. So
I'm not too sure about that. I don't have the Downton Abbey side of England, so you'll realize as we go forwards that it's the other side of England that I'm from.
Well, anything is better than what I'm used to as the old American accent. Speaking of, where exactly in England are you from?
I'm originally from Essex, so just outside London. My family is from the East End of London, so they're known as Cockneys. But I'm originally from Essex, yeah. But now I'm in Austin, Texas. So I'm slowly working on my Texas accent. I've been here now 9 years, but it's not really sinking in just yet.
I don't think you are. If I could, again, the accent is not nearly as exciting as having that good Brit accent. But no, that's interesting that you settled in Austin. It's kind of brings us to a good first question, which is like, first of all, I wanted, as a female in the industry, how did you sort of get your start in e-commerce, and where did your idea for ShipperHQ come from, and how did you really get that going?
Yeah, I mean, so my background is computer science degree. So like I actually started programming when I was about 9. So I was in that early kind of, when in the 80s when the computers come out, and my parents got my brother one, and I kind of stole it. And it's kind of funny from a women in tech perspective, because we didn't have the internet then or anything. You just had your house, your family, and school. And I was aware as I went up to sixth form college, when you're 16, that I was the only girl in the class. But it wasn't really truly aware of the women in tech issue until older, I would say. But the way that ShipperHQ came about was a company called WebShopApps, which I created to start off with. And really that was just my husband was selling online. We had young children, and he just wanted to sell online. And I did one of believe it was the first Magento store in the UK. I just built it out for him. And I was not from an ecom background. I'm from an FX, foreign exchange. And then basically I had to solve his shipping problems. And I think a lot of stuff was quite US centric on Magento at that time. And so I solved that for the UK. People just kept reaching out to me saying, can you fix this? Can you fix that? And it really wasn't, I'd like to say, there was a brilliantly architected plan, but it was more just trying to help people out and just being interested in the puzzle of it. And I think it just went from there. And ShipperHQ came out in 2015. We pivoted over to SaaS, and I moved to the States in 2013. And we've been building multiple platforms now, and big on Shopify, BigCommerce, and it's just it's you take steps and things happen, and you have to then choose, whether or not you go the next step. And I think I just kept taking the next step, and somehow I'm here. So
well, you've been doing a lot of things right. So those steps that you've been taking have been, I think I think it's very similar to how careers form. Sometimes it's a very linear, when you want to become a doctor, it's not like, oh, I found myself, becoming a surgeon and doing through this way. It's a very direct line to get there. Whereas a lot of other industries, you find that it's the steps you take and the work you do that leads you to different parts in your career. And I think it's interesting because it's never really this equals that. It's always, I think a lot of little things equal certain things. And so when you put the right initiatives forward and you're taking the right steps, like you said, you don't really know what's going to happen. You kind of just do it with, your best intentions and, your best educated guess, I guess. And make sure, and it kind of leads you leads you to Austin, Texas sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it is, like when I was younger, we'd be at work and we'd be talking about business ideas and stuff like that. But, you can see now how it got to where it is. But like, at the time, you don't really realize it. And even your skill set when you're working, like I was kind of more of a generalist. And I think that really held me in good stead for, becoming a company owner. But I never wanted to run a company. I thought people that ran companies were crazy. So I still think people that run companies are crazy. I just happen to be one of them. And I certainly did not expect to be running a company when my kids were 1 and 3 when I started the business, and I did not expect to be doing it at that stage. I thought I'd be. Sorry,
I said Wonder Woman.
Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, you just choose a different path at a certain point, and you say, do I wanted to spend more time with them, and I'm not sure I actually did, but I think and I think that's one of the reasons why now I feel there is a need for people like me to be seen visibly, because I think there's a lot of pressure to go and do these things when you're younger. To fit a stereotype of what a company founder should be. And I would say everybody's journey is different. And, like some people have said, well, if you've not done it by the time you're 28, you're finished. And it's like, that's just simply not true. Like the world is very different now. And there is so much scope for moving around. Even I think as people get into their 50s, I think we're going to see people starting to be they're much more technical savvy. And I think you're going to see a lot of business creation at that age. And it's an interesting time to be in tech, I think.
I totally agree. I think being that's a really good takeaway. Being a generalist is something that I think used to be very not looked down upon, but wasn't seen as valuable as someone that was super hyper focused on one specific thing. But I find that when you're a generalist and you can get as much information and knowledge about many different things, it's always better than having, because you can always sort of lean forward on certain things that to be more of your strengths, whereas you still have that understanding of other areas in the business, which I think is, like you said, especially when you're starting a business, so important because it gives you that, I think, that empathetic perspective as to what it takes to, for instance, I was a project manager on certain projects before. I understand, what their intent is in terms of keeping things in scope and in budget may not be the same way that a client services person, sees the project. And so it's really important that I think you get that perspective when you can. And I always find it's helpful when I work with people and for companies and with colleagues that have had that experience, because it just sort of makes it, not all the time. I mean, obviously sometimes you're very hyper focused. You're a developer, your, area inside and out, but a lot of times it really does lead to a bit more of an empathetic work environment where people have understandings of what it feels like to be in different positions and do different things within the business.
Yeah.
I guess. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's difficult though when you're like that. I mean, I was talking to a colleague about it today, and I was like, "You're a bridge guy," and he was like, "But what's my title? Like, what am I doing there?" And I'm like, "Look, I can give you all the titles in the world, but I know what you actually do." And
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's an insecurity in there. Like people want to be in a certain pigeonhole, and you have to work that out with them about what that is. But often the best people are those glue people in a company, and that they have a very pivotal role, but sometimes not always quantifiable. But it's, I think, especially with remote work nowadays, that's becoming more and more important, and need people around. Really, you need both. You need all types. So
I totally agree. I think that's a really smart. Speaking of work, working remotely, how do you feel as a business owner and, entrepreneur? How has that changed the landscape of your business, and like, have you guys started doing more like hybrid or
yeah.
anything?
Yeah, so I think when COVID hit for us, so we were always kind of hybrid. So we have staff in Austin, we have some staff in Ohio, and then we've got people over in UK, Europe, and Australia. So we've always had like this hybrid approach, but our Austin office was mainly in office. When we went remote, it was very hard. There's no two ways about it, and I think you guys probably experienced this as well, where just very, very busy. A very panicked situation in lots of ways, and just running hyper fast, growing hyper quick, and not necessarily having all the processes to support a remote team. And certainly around training, I do think there's some real gaps on the software kind of support around training and even communication. So earlier this year, we went and got an office in Austin, and what we do is we ask our staff to come in 4 days a month, so 2 days every 2 weeks. Not all staff do, and we've got some that are fully remote, and we do it on case by case. But I do think it really does help just getting in a room and sitting down with people, and especially culturally as well. I think like some of us I am definitely a much more direct person, and on Slack that doesn't always come across well. So, and Americans are much more in general, especially in the South. They're so polite, and everything is very complimentary, and the English people are like, where I'm from, is just much more like, let's get this done, and that can get lost in a remote environment. Really lost. And when you get in an office, you realize that you both have the same intent, and the humor starts to come out. And like for me, I found that very hard to do in a remote world, because I'm busy as well. So you forget some of the niceties that you need to wrap around it all.
Yes.
And it's very easy to get misinterpretation around that. Yeah. So that's been our kind of story on it. And I think it's each to their own. So people that are remote first, companies that are remote first, like, good on them. But I don't think we are a remote first company. I think we're becoming a remote company, but I think it's going to take time. And ultimately, our numbers need to add up. So, we have to work on that.
That makes sense. I don't think it's necessarily personally needs to be a goal of I think it's good to be flexible, but I am in a total agreement with you that we're an international agency. We have people all over the world. I think a lot about the fact that technology is where it is has allowed us to pivot the way we did. Like, imagine if we went through that pandemic during, even 20 years ago, people wouldn't be able to do the level of work that we've been able to do remotely. So in that sense, it's really incredible that we have the capabilities, but at the same time, from a psychological standpoint and even in information sharing, conversation and in-person, interaction is an energy, it creates energy. It creates that level of thinking and thought-provoking, ideas. And so I think a lot of times, when I am with my team, I see how sort of things click a little bit quicker, how we pick up on things more because whether or not it's intentional, listening to conversations that are going on and how other areas are doing their business. And when you're in a remote environment, it's obviously a lot more secluded in that sense, and you don't really hear what's going on. And it's a bit, so my point is, I agree. I think Shipper is taking a really good effort at not saying like, oh, because everyone is remote, we have to be that way, but rather finding a way where there's a happy medium, because I do think that there's a lot of value in that in-person interaction, being with your team physically whenever, every now and then, and just kind of getting that understanding of who you are as people as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that you're working with, you're like, oh, I never actually met you in person. I don't have that, personal connection with you yet, even though but then a lot of times it's funny because like video chat and all that stuff is great. I think it's just, like you said, like a happy medium of, not going one way 100%, but keeping it very sort of, median, if you will.
Yeah, I think it depends on hiring as well. I mean, like obviously, if you're hiring people that have been remote for a while and they're senior and they're very used to that, then that's fine. If you're getting into training scenarios with more junior people, or you're just trying to lift people up, then that's just where I do think as the time goes on, the training aspect, around IT will get a lot better, but I just don't think it's there yet to support some of that kind of one-to-many learning, and especially for small companies where we don't have the ability to just have people working full-time on training material for the staff. Like, you are relying a lot on passing of knowledge between each other, and as much as you can put tools in for that, it's hard to do that in a one-to-many. But it's I'd hope that at some point we are fully remote. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, I think that yeah, for sure. I think there'll always be a need for like some in-person meetings and stuff and like team building. I think that's important, but I agree. I think it's allows people to have a lot more of a flexible environment, which is really important, especially when you have I'm speaking from someone who does not have toddlers running around yet, so I'm sure those people are a little they feel differently about working from home sometimes. But again, it's just about being, I think, understanding that and like you said, the environment is changing, the way that we do things, the way that we had thought, okay, we have to kind of fit a mold in order to be seen as valuable and have a very specific title. It's the same way the work environment's changing. So I'm excited and eager to see how we all kind of start to work on that a bit more and see how that kind of changes as things progress forward. And things are opening up. Like I just went to Seattle and for the first time and visited some of the team members there from Overdose. And it was really great to be in person with them. So I think having some steady sort of cadence of that connection is great, but I enjoy the remote work as well. So
yeah. So you're remote mostly then?
Mostly remote. Areas where there's a lot more members have kind of like a office space, so that we'll go into and work from the office, shared office, when we have team members here. I mean, New York, I'm based in New York. I should have mentioned that early on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was wondering where you was. I was thinking maybe Denver, but
no,
yeah, I didn't guess New York.
What made you think Denver versus New York?
I don't know. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking maybe she's in Denver, but I don't know why.
That's so funny.
There's no basis for that statement.
It's interesting because New York, you have so much, which is, I think, a positive on my end, because I am in client services and I like to meet with the potential clients that we're working with. And it's worked out great where most of them have a lot of members here in New York that I think I can, and I can connect with and really make sure that I feel like they're they have our attention. So it's good to have someone here like myself, but areas where it's less client facing, it's less of an importance, I think, to have them have that connection, readily to clients in person. So, but Brooke, New York, I think, and Austin, I was going to say, because I was there in, I believe June, in the depths of the summer. It was my first time in Austin. I actually loved it.
That's good.
Yeah,
don't love it too much. There's too many people moving here, so
I
we can't
know.
encourage it too much. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
It was crazy hearing, Apple and all these other people were like, yeah, there was a guy I met on a flight who told me, he was like, yeah, he was flying back with me to New York. He was like, yeah, I've been working for Apple for 3 years. And they told me finally that I had to move to Austin. So his flight back was basically his visit for the first time to Austin, getting a house, all that stuff. And it's crazy. He said, yeah, it's becoming a very big tech spot for a lot. I mean, it already was, but it's definitely growing.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be. It's nice. I think that everybody says, it's getting destroyed, right? But I've seen videos from many years ago where they were saying that as well. So yeah. I think it's one of those places, I would say a bit similar to New York and London, where they're constantly evolving, and I think Austin kind of is fitting into that of that evolution. But I'm a firm believer in if you're going to move somewhere, you have to kind of embrace what that is and also respect it, So, that to me seems to be like key, that, like Austin has its own character and that needs to stay. But also there is an evolution that happens around it. But I think it is about people just realizing that when you walk into, anywhere, you walk into New York, right? You've got to embrace and want to live there. Otherwise, you shouldn't live in New York.
Yeah,
and but I also think that the other key thing that I really think is that you should never forget where you come from. And for me, I live in Texas, and Quentin, who works for me, says I'm the most Texan non-Texan you'll meet from in his eyes, because I really do get behind the some of the stuff here. Not clearly there's some issues as well here, but ignoring that, but also I believe that I am British, and I'm not going to forget my background, and I think it's important to stay true to that as well, which is especially as a CEO as well, it's kind of interesting, because as you grow as a CEO, I think it's quite easy to get full of yourself, and I've been very determined to not get like that, and because I think that it's important for people to understand where you were, like, so that they can see what's possible. I mean, and that does come with problems, because sometimes people can think that I work in the local supermarket, so it comes with its issues. But you have to know when to turn it on and off. But yeah, but I think I just think it's mega important to show that stuff. But that's the thing on Austin. It's like, I'm very proud to be a part of Austin. I do describe it like a desert to people to try and put them off. So don't tell anyone what it's like.
I won't. I trust. I'm in complete agreement with you. I think as we become more internationalized, and more of a global economy, which we have been, but like, it's becoming more and more apparent that, as companies, begin to cross borders and there are specific regions, like you building ShipperHQ in the States after kind of understanding the market in Europe. I think that's a lot about, like you said, that empathetic understanding, knowing where you come from, but also realizing that in order to go with the flow and understand how to innovate, you have to be able to immerse yourself and realize that while you're still that person from, your hometown or your home city, things happen differently in different areas. And like trying to fit one size fits all is, especially as you, and I'd love to hear more from you, like how you felt just the way we do business in the States, how you feel is different than what you sort of built in Europe, in the UK.
Yeah, well, I get it's a little hard for me to say, because even in my previous job, I worked a lot with actually New Yorkers. So, because I was in the trading space, so
oh right.
I'm a little over Americanized, I would say. And so it's hard for me to truly say. I do think though that one of the biggest things that I found in America. And there's a lot of talk of the American dream and everything else, but I think that, and especially in Austin, I read about, I was reading something about Austin the other day, and it says you can walk down the street in Austin, and there can be a cowboy on one side and a guy from California on the other, and they'll smile at each other, kind of, like they're both accepted, and all in between is accepted. And I do think that I do think in general. And obviously there are exceptions to this. There's less of a hierarchy over here in terms of how you can advance, and especially with technology as well. You are online ultimately, and I think that helps you advance, so that when you go out to events and everything, people may not think that you fit that stereotype, but you've already built your reputation. So like you are now able to, fit into that ecosystem and that community and be accepted. And I think that just America really supports that as a country, in my mind, with caveats. And I think in England, it has many great things going for it as well. But I definitely found it more restrictive from an advancement perspective. I worked in the city for 10 years, and there's just a real hierarchy up there. And I was quite senior, but I did really come across some of that hierarchy side. And I found e-commerce, I think, is ripe for people like myself walking into it and and getting involved in this profession, because you've probably found this yourself. There's just a lot of room to grow in this industry without constraint.
I think that's such a good point. I think I've lived all of my life, besides a brief stint studying abroad, and I think in New York, and again, New York is definitely not. It's hard because when you live in a city, we all talk about how everything outside of a city is very different than what it really is like.
Yeah.
Or is really more of a reality, I would say, because when you're in a city like New York, you're really not representative of everything around you. It's very much a melting pot. And so I think it's important to travel outside of your little hub, wherever that may be, and realize that, like, for instance, like any place in the world, a major metropolitan city should not be considered the representation of, or the way in which an entire country feels.
You can't put stuff into buckets, and you just can't say one thing or the other. It's very you just can't. But America's been a good country to me, and I really, wherever I've gone, I've managed to, even if I don't always agree with everybody's opinion, I've managed to, have a conversation and respect people. And I think hopefully likewise, and I think that's what's important, is that if you're having a conversation, then that's progress, right?
Absolutely. I totally agree. Especially now in our current environment, I think any sort of open conversation is that you're exactly right, is progress. I wanted to kind of talk about your business, and you service so many different amazing brands. But I also know that there's a lot of competition in the space, and with other apps and things like that. What do you think really separates yourself as a company from, in terms of like what your capabilities from others? Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of companies that have the words ship in their name, and I think that's key. The logistics space and supply chain and everything is a massive area, and it's a quite a complex area, and I would say quite old school still, and I think that is changing. I think really for us at ShipperHQ, we've really focused on the checkout delivery experience, and if you think about Amazon, and the amount of money that they plow into their free shipping, their fulfillment side, etc. And that when you go through that checkout, I would say one of the major reasons that people shop on Amazon is not for the Amazon shopping experience, it's because of when they're going to get that product and that delivery. I mean, delivery is the first physical point of contact with your customer, the stats on it are astonishing from Amazon. It's like something like $1 in 4 is being spent around shipping. So from a merchant perspective, it's critical, and we really are that top of funnel in the checkout. And that's what's going to make the conversion happen. I mean, an astonishing amount of abandoned carts come because people don't know when it's going to get shipped. The shipping comes at like about 70-80% of the reasons behind abandoned cart loss. So a lot of people put a lot of they like the kind of more, the fluffier side, the product, the homepage, the this, the that. If you forget, I mean, if I go and buy a pair of shoes or something, I want to know when I'm going to get it. And,
totally. And
I think that's ShipperHQ, and it's an interesting space, and there's a lot of underneath it that goes into that side. And I think that's our key differentiator, is just the volume of business logic that we have to support. We can pretty much support, I'd say about 97% of merchant use cases that we see now. So we have a pretty high coverage rate on being able to support them. And they go from very small to extremely large sites that are doing, over $1 billion a year.
That's amazing. And so how many people do you currently have as part of your company now?
So we are currently about 52. We actually come down in size. So we were just over 70 at the start of the year. But we shrunk a bit just through natural loss, and we parted ways with some people. Just felt like this year coming into 2022, we'd had a race for 2 years, and we really wanted to kind of just take a kind of reset around the company and build for that next piece of growth that we want to go through. And I think, as we know, there's been the great resignation as well. And I think, a lot of people have gone through COVID with a company and then want to go and, do something new and start a new chapter. And I think we've definitely seen some of that, but also raising the bar as well around, you need different types of people at different stages, and the bar raises in a way, but also I think the type of person that you need changes. So those people may be more suited to a much smaller company, and they're much more glue people, but now we need more people in lanes and stuff. So so we're very happy, and I'm quite happy because I needed a bit of a break as well from having so many staff. I always said I'd quit at 20, and I'm still here. So so it's been quite nice to just improve communications, I would say, has been the major win for us this year. And the staff seem extremely happy actually at the moment. And that's a pleasure to see, because I do think that at the start of the year, like, people were stressed, like it was just, I think a lot of people were feeling that, not just our company. I think a lot of companies were just exhausted, through the 2 years of COVID. I mean, did you feel that your side as well?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people, going back to that work remote thing, you really need to prioritize your mental well-being, especially in a time where we weren't able to interact with other people physically. We had to be very careful, and in a lot of ways we technically still do. But I think for us and for a lot of businesses that we've seen, it was really a period where, just because people were actually working more in front of their computers, because of the, work remote. There was no sort of inter days lunch break, that kind of all meshed together in your sort of daily thing. You would bring it to your desk and you wouldn't really walk around as much. You kind of would stay seated and just be super plugged in. And a lot of times it's important, what I've noticed, to give yourself, like you said, just a minute to breathe and really reflect, even on like a task or a day or your daily things. And I think for us, it was really about understanding what that happy medium is. And because I think burnout is a real, especially during COVID, was like a real thing. I think everyone was and we were lucky in our space. And I think I can speak for you that we're in the, digital world. So a lot of what we were doing was became even more important because people were realizing that, yes, in-person shopping is always going to be a thing, but e-commerce, a lot of businesses we found were doubling down, obviously, on e-commerce as another way to really help the suffering businesses of during COVID. And so I think it was a lot of, grind during that time. And it still is, but I think learning how to work smarter, not always longer hours, is, learning how to be in charge of your time and working smarter, not always longer or hard. I think working hard is always important.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I think, it's that pace, not haste, right? We have very strict things around switching off at 6 o'clock and, like we ban people from Slack after then. And because we're around the clock, we kind of say, right, US team needs to log off at 6 and we enforce it. But you still don't know what these people are doing when they go home. And when you're in a hard growth, like a fast growing, always busy business that there's always work to do, it is hard to get the people at work just to switch off. And it's, it's hard to switch off yourself. But I think one of the advantages of us being bootstrapped is that we've been able to make decisions like this. And investors would probably look at me and go, "You're crazy." And I would say, you need time to breathe. And you sometimes need to, it's that whole, do you want to go and climb that next mountain when you're exhausted, right? No, you need to regroup. You need to decide your team. But you also need to enjoy the journey that you're having. I'm not here just to keep climbing mountains and not have a little bit of fun along the way, because this is a large part of my working week and my year. And I think that's important for the staff as well. And I think when we reached a point where we were just grinding, and we were doing great stuff financially. I mean, we had massive growth last year. We're on a good course this year. But I think that the staff needed a breather. And I think as a CEO, sometimes you have to make those kinds of decisions to get your team to, you don't always want to stand in a storm. And I don't think you don't need to be there all the time. And we had 2 years of a storm in my mind, and we needed to find some sunshine.
Oh, I totally agree. I think that just talking to you, having that pulse point on the happiness of your team and understanding what's best for them. And, because I think, like you said, sometimes CEOs or founders can get very, big-headed in terms of their aspirations and just grow by all means necessary. And for a very brief moment, it seems like a great idea to have that mindset because it's working. But then you soon realize that unless you are doing so in a very thoughtful and slow burn way, you're going to burn out the team that is helping you kind of go for the long haul, and reach those peaks and really base camp, if you will, kind of rest and get the energy to continue to climb that peak, because it's a marathon. It's not a race. I mean, it's not a sprint. It is. I don't know.
We did, and I think that's why you're seeing, now with, some layoffs and stuff like that and cutbacks. I think with COVID, there was an artificial lift in our companies. It's almost like we all got investment. And as a result, I think that, we were building really solid foundations and we were growing well. But I think we started stacking cards on top of each other a little bit around it. And I think you can end up, and I'm very determined not to do this. Like somebody said to me once, and he was like, what do you want? Do you want to drive for money, or do you want to keep the customer happy? And I was like, that's not even a question in my mind. Like, that this customer is always going to come first to me. And if that means that this business grows slower, I don't care, because I'm not here for the financial game of that. I'm here because, I'm paying my mortgage just like everybody else.
Exactly.
And I want to sleep well at night, and I want to know that my customers are happy. And I think that is a real advantage to being bootstrapped, because if you go to our About Us page, our chief strategy officer is actually my 15-year-old son, and that's the guy that I talk to sometimes, and it's a bit of a joke in the office, because they'll go, well, what does Lloyd say? And I'll say, all right, I'll go and ask him. And we have a joke about it. But look, I'm not saying I have it all figured out, but I also would like to say that I've spent 12 years on this, and I've got some staff that have been with me all the way along, and I hope they enjoyed the journey and they kind of come out of it stronger than they went in. And that's all that matters to me.
I think that's a really, really good point. And I think, to that point, it's really just about, like, even in client services, nothing makes you feel better than knowing that your clients are taken care of and that they're happy. Because I have been in the industry for 10 years, and I feel like I see how bad your reputation precedes you, right?
Yeah.
And the more you sort of burn those bridges, in terms of, just because I think your clients and customers can tell when you are just looking for a quick way to make quick money, and by all means necessary. But there's always going to be the importance of customer care, that, and I've read the reviews on you guys, and that's everyone says about ShipperHQ is the customer service is incredible. And I think that in and of itself, like, is a great, something that's a great.
It's hard though. Yeah, it's a hard thing to keep though, and it's a very easy thing to lose. And I think at times it's been a struggle, but I'm gonna hold the bar high, and not all. I think in tech it's very easy to kind of just go to all of the fun stuff, right? And when you're running a team or you're running a company, there are decisions that you have to make, and unfortunately, they're not all great decisions. I think, but I stand by it. I do stand by the decisions I've made, and when we've agreed with some staff to part ways, I think that they may not realize it at the time, but I think ultimately it's better for them. And I hope that even some people come to ShipperHQ and they want to be in kind of lanes, and we're really more of a ski slope kind of company. And but I think even if they're with ShipperHQ a short time, I think they learn a lot here. I always say you learn more here in a year than you would 3 years elsewhere. But it's not always comfortable. And I think if growth companies are not comfortable ultimately, but what you do need to do is marry it together, and just, like I say, I just think it's necessary you can't just keep pushing. You've got to have breathers, and I think that's key for anyone in this space, is to learn when to switch off.
I totally agree, and I think it's become more important for people to take time off. Because again, there was a 2-year span there where no one, and you notice everyone traveling abroad this summer. I feel like I didn't get to go to Europe, but everyone was, as they should have been, taking those trips and traveling the world and seeing things. And because I think travel is the best way to see, how the world works and lives, and get out of your bubble. And so I think a lot of people, after being so tied down to their home and never not being able to really leave, it was important that those people got the opportunity to travel and do those things with their families that we had missed out on for those 2 years during COVID. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Taking that breather and that step and really showcasing the work and celebrating the fact that you guys have grown and had been able to kind of stand through the storm is a big, a big win for all companies that were able to do so.
Yeah, I think one of the things I say to some of the guys is like, I think there's a general sense, I think we're getting over it now, but it has been a general sense of unrest of,
yes.
It's almost like we're in that kind of high adrenaline, what's next, what's coming next, and a little bit of panic. And it's like, I kind of remind them of 2019 and I go, and even if they weren't working for me, like, was you happy then? What was driving you then? And it was like, actually, things were simpler then, and we wasn't trying to find the next big thing all the time.
Yes.
And it is understanding, like, and sitting back, at a personal level and going, what is it I want and what is enough, right? Because I do think there's a lot of pressure from social and everything else to say, that we need to keep doing these things. And one of the things that I've tried to do on LinkedIn is just to say that I don't think that we need to be doing like, because everybody needs to be driven like that. If you want to go and spend 100-hour weeks driving up Mount Everest, then you go do that. But I don't think that's for everybody, and that's okay. And I'm a highly driven person, but I think it's a dangerous rhetoric because people can feel that they're not as good as other people or they should be doing it as well and everything. And that kind of stuff can really, and I've seen it, you go and jump into that, and before you know it, you're in financial debt, your partner's not happy with you. It's a very big thing to keep jumping across and jumping up. And I don't know that it necessarily gets you to a happier place. So I think it's an interesting one from a career perspective, though, because, as I say, I'm an ambitious person, but I think people really need to do it on a case-by-case basis around what their personal ambitions are and also what's important to them, because it's very easy to forget what's important.
Totally. And I think comparison can be a very dangerous, especially now in our ultra visible social world in terms of digital, social media, all of that stuff. It can be a very, like you said, slippery slope when you're constantly trying to live up to these certain expectations, but then you sort of realize, oh, I've been following this sort of methodology of this other company, and oh, now they're going into financial debt. And you're like, well, why was I following them when I had my own sort of north compass?
Yeah. It's been difficult on that one. I mean, like around us, there's been a lot of investment and stuff, and a lot of, there's a lot of messaging out there which has been very difficult to work in and retain staff in. But I think and I hope that we're getting to a stable place around that. And one of my key tasks is to protect my staff and make sure that they can pay their mortgages, right? And like that, I'll do that every day of the week, and that's important to me.
That's, well, I still pay rent, so as soon as that goes for
rent.
That goes, which is probably the amount of a mortgage. It is the amount of a mortgage, especially living in New York.
It's probably more in New York. You're probably paying more than me.
Don't remind my parents or me, because they're like, you could be paying off your mortgage. I'm like, I know, but buying a house is not, or an apartment is not always that easy. So, no, I agree. I know we've got like 10 more minutes left, so I kind of wanted to ask you if there's something this is more of a fun question. Is there anything you miss about living in the UK? I'm sure there is, but anything in particular?
The humor is different.
Yes.
So, yeah, I can have a lot more quick fire. I've got a very dry sense of humor. I have to temper it here.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a little cheeky humor I've got as well, which is like, yeah, I'll probably get cancelled at some point in America.
No.
But you know, like that I miss. I definitely miss the food. Yeah, I love to go back, and I keep a place over there, so I take the kids back in the summer. And
make sure their English accents stay tip top, or have they completely?
No, I have one American. The CSO is American. The older one is still got his English accent, but
got it.
They were 6 and 8 when they come out. They're 15 and 17 now. So
God.
Yeah, they think I don't know what they think. They think I'm pretty useless, to be honest. So they generally are like incompetent mother. Yeah.
Please, you run a global business. Incompetent is the last word I would use to describe you.
They're great levelers. So even the husband is like.
They keep you down to earth. It sounds.
You need to stay. It's important, I think, to stay. Yeah. And it comes into that women in tech thing, and I think like from your side as well. When I was younger, I never really appreciated the need to be visible, right? And I was very anti it. I was like, I wanted to be seen as an engineer, not as a female engineer. And for years, I was. And then as I had the company and everything, I would talk to people and say, I'm not going to talk at events because I don't want to be picked just because I'm female. I know they're going to pick me. Yes. So I had stopped talking at events because I just didn't want to be labeled with that. I wanted to be known as, a great CEO or a great programmer, or, I did not want to be known as a great female CEO. But what I've realized over time and through talking to people is that it's very important to lay a path to show what is possible, because you need those role models, and it's hard because I am quite a private individual. I don't like sharing stuff, and I do limit what I share, but I think that you have to temper some of this with it's important that people do see people like you. And I think that comes, of race, religion, whatever, because we need more of that. So when you've got voices that are less represented, it's important for us to speak up. Somebody says, well, why don't we talk about men in tech? And I'm like, well, you can. Why don't we talk about, I say with all men in tech, well, at some point you're going to be 55 and then you're going to see discrimination. So like it's going to happen then, right? But so we need more of that representation as well. But for me as a woman in tech, I represent this and I can talk about it. It doesn't mean that when we hire, I say that we hire the best person for the job. Yep. I'm not going to hire based on any form of discrimination, positive or negative. And we have a very diverse team accidentally, right? But we do need to see representation of, I think older CEOs, female CEOs, different ethnic CEOs, and people that maybe don't fit the stereotype of what you'd see on the front of Forbes, right? Absolutely. I think it's important. I think that's important, but it's all important as well. Even people like yourself, how are you represented? How do people see you? And it's that double side of it as well, of when they see different things and how they react, and you're like, well, that's not me at all. You're exactly. You. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's about.
I think that you're so right. It's funny because I'm obviously earlier on in my career, but still I find that, there's people who are we have these like 30 under 30, but what about the people who are doing things amazing that are not, spring chickens? I think that's pretty impressive too, because if you think about how difficult it is, even for myself, how quickly technology changes in terms of even all of these like TikTok and all the things that, the new generation is really using as their main social platform, like to keep yourself, what's the word? Abreast and even up to date with that stuff is so, it requires you to really be quick on your feet and really understand it. And so when I see older generations really picking up on that and knowing how to work it, and even just like innovate in this rapidly changing space, I find to be just as much of an impressive feat as it is for someone who's younger, who, you know, comes up with a great business. So I think it's, like you said, important to share both sides of that. And I'm really, really, really happy to have the opportunity to have spoken and really speak with you. And I think what you're doing is incredible. And I very much look up to you as a female in the space and just in the space in general. And so, yeah, I wanted to let you know that. I think it's, keep being
Thank
who
you.
you are.
Yes, and keep being who you are. I mean, and
Yes,
that's the key. Whether you're, you know, 19 or 60, male or female, just
exactly.
lay your own path is the
Right.
message, you know, and don't worry about what you are doing or you're not doing. And I think they're the people that you know, I think in lots of ways are happiest. So I
Exactly.
really appreciate meeting you and seeing what you're doing over there at Overdose. You guys are you're going from strength to strength.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You as well. And, you know, I'm so glad that there's people like yourself in the industry that can help just kind of, you know, set the stage for what's possible. And I'm really, really grateful for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I am very excited to speak with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to meet in person in New York.
Yes.
I'm all down for
Awesome.
cocktails.
New York. You'll have to show me the Texas way.
Oh yeah, come on down. I'll
I
put my
will.
cowboy hat on.
And then I'll have to show you some good, you probably have eaten it all already in New York, but any good places I'll definitely take you to.
Absolutely, a good
Fine in Texas.
Italian. Thanks very
Exactly.
much.
Thank you so much, Karen.